Morning, everyone. I'm Amy Robinson, founder and executive director of LOCO BC. And we're going to get started right on time because we have a packed agenda. And I think there were last count, I think 87 registrants. So I have trusted someone else to let them in as they arrive, but want to honor your time for being here promptly. I want to acknowledge that I'm calling in from what is now known as East Vancouver, the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And we'd love it if you introduce yourself in the chat and also let us know what territory you are calling in from. Calling in from, I believe, all over the province and all over Canada. So LOCO BC is a not-for-profit organization founded in 2009, and we do research on the important impacts of independent businesses and campaigns to focus on shifting spending towards local businesses. So that might be consumer spending, it might be business spending, it might be institutional and government spending. And then sometimes when we identify a barrier that's in the way of independent businesses thriving, we will do some further analysis if we can provide data that can help to provide some advocacy. And so we've done some work around permitting and licensing delays, and a new project as well that we're working on, just launching this month, is looking at commercial affordability. You may know that there's a crisis in commercial affordability that's concurrent with the residential affordability crisis. And so we're partnering with developers and municipalities to identify best practices and tools and resources for supporting independent business and commercial affordability. So if you're interested in that, contact us.
Hi, my name is Em. I'm a social procurement consultant at Buy Social Canada. We're a social enterprise that believes that procurement is more than just an economic transaction, but it contributes to community, social, and economic goals. We also deliver the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative, which is a community of local governments and other public purchasers who are committed to implementing social and local procurement in their regions. I'm really happy to be here today. I come from rural BC. I grew up on a dirt road in Grand Forks, BC, and so I understand the need to de-risk supply chains and prioritize local buying intimately. Yeah, are we sharing screens? Sorry. I'm seeing, I'm not sure.
I'm having trouble advancing the slides for
Okay,
some reason. There's a bit of a delay, so.
that's no problem.
I'm not seeing the slides, Amy.
Oh, okay.
The presentation seems to.
Something.
Okay.
Says I'm screen sharing.
Okay. I'll also say too, at Buy Social Canada, we're seeing opportunities to buy and sell with impact at all levels in the marketplace. So we do social procurement advocacy, education, and consulting. We're working to take back control from the invisible hand of capitalism. We're creating a social value marketplace. Our impact at the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative speaks for itself. I don't know if we're seeing the slides here, but we've had about 30 participating communities right now, 200 plus member staff trained, and 600 plus participants in social procurement training. It's really amazing to be part of this work and being with all of these great communities, implementing social and local procurement in their own ways that make sense to them. Yeah, that's me.
So sorry, I'm trying to, we tested this, we tested it and it was working, and now let's see, where can we start? I'm going to try it one more way. Just not seeing slides still?
I can see them now.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah, we can see them now.
I hope that that doesn't change. So, okay, apologies. So let me slide through technology. So fun. Okay, so I'm going to dive in. We're going to flip back and forth, Em and I, and so you're going to hear from both of us intermittently. So I'm going to cover the important aspects of local procurement and just a little high level. When we say local, that also includes social enterprises. There's not any real publicly owned social enterprises. And local is often used interchangeably with small, although not all local businesses are small. So we're going to talk a lot about the definition of local that we use and that you might consider using a little later. And I also say independent a lot. So that really just means that they're independently owned and operated. And so that gives them the freedom to make important decisions that affect their economic impact. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. So we've been doing research since 2013, a really long time, on the impact of local businesses. And this research is from 2019, when we researched the impact of local retailers and restaurants. And we found that local brick and mortar businesses have 4 times the impact of their multinational competitors. And where that comes from is four main areas. So when we trace a dollar of revenue that comes into a local business, it recirculates more often in the local business than if you spend that dollar of revenue with a multinational. So that's basically what we track when we look at economic impact. And so the areas where that local business has much more impact is in keeping the profits with local owners, so reinvesting the profits locally, purchasing local. It's much more often that local businesses purchase inventory if they have it, and services and other products that they might consume in their business from other local businesses. And so that keeps much more of the revenue recirculating and moving out kind of in that economic web that businesses are connected within. And then another important aspect is payroll. So all of the jobs that are created are local. Of course, all businesses that are here create jobs, but we're going to see how local businesses create much more. And the higher level jobs are around businesses' headquarters. And so that's much more of a large economic impact. And then the fourth area, you'll notice these all start with P's. That's the 4P methodology I'm going to tell you about. But philanthropy, so charitable giving, is the fourth P. Local businesses just donate much more in terms of each dollar of revenue than their multinational competitors. So it's up to 25 times more. So we've also studied business to business type suppliers. So we looked at office supply companies and found that local businesses, again, produced double the impact of their next closest multinational competitor. In this case, we looked at BC-based office supplier Mills. They're Mills Basics at the time. That's why our graphic says, but they're called Mills Office Productivity now. And their next competitor was Grand & Toy, and they were a little bit higher than somebody like Staples because they had a unionized workforce. So their payroll numbers were a little higher than they might have been at Staples. And then we also looked at Office Depot, which at the time had shut down all of their retail outlets. And so we were really like looking ahead to when you buy from someone that is purely online compared to all the brick and mortar multinationals and then the local business. And you can see that it is a much bigger recirculation, 32% more when it's a local business compared to someone that's purely online. And that translates into a huge economic impact when you think about procurement contracts, particularly. I know we have a lot of procurement folks on the call today. And it is, up to 100% more recirculation when you look at a $1 million procurement contract. So far, those studies have looked at the business itself rather than the products. And so we're going to encourage you to look at both the product and the business if you're buying products. And we did some work with Vancity in 2021 and looked at, for the first time, the economic and environmental impact of local products from local businesses and compared them to imported products from multinationals. And we looked at 5 different products. There's lots of information on the study, but the highlights are that if you buy a local product from a local business, that keeps up to 92% of every dollar recirculating in the local economy. And it also reduces greenhouse gases up to 66%. And, you know, the products we chose, we didn't stack the deck by choosing products that we knew were going to have a lower greenhouse gas emissions impact. We worked with Ostrom, and they were formerly called Offsetters. And so even they didn't really have a clue which products would have a lower carbon impact when we did that study. And then we found that those products have between 2 and 7% economic benefit compared to an imported product. It's an average of about 4 times. And then, of course, the local businesses that sell those products are also important, and they created an average economic benefit of 3 times their brick and mortar competitors. And then we had like a high of 107 times. I know it's like out in the stratosphere, and just a bit of a caveat on that one is that we compared, you know, a local product from a local business to a product that is one of those direct to consumer models. So that's a bit of a rare instance, but it is happening more and more that there's no retail presence, no sales staff, and that they're sort of coming directly to a consumer from elsewhere. And in that case, it has the local business has a much bigger impact than a product that is sent that way. So just briefly, again, the four areas of economic impact are that, you know, profits stay with local owners and investors, that the payroll, both the employment payroll and then the benefits that go to local employees have a big economic impact, that purchasing goods, services, consumables, things like that at the business are much more often local with other local businesses. And so that creates a big economic impact. And then the charitable giving, local causes that are the 4th P, philanthropy, creates a big impact. And then, you know, that's the economic side. And then on the social environmental side, we say that's also the 5th P, that's the practices. And so we're also concerned about those things. And so, you know, we often hear, well, multinationals, you know, they create jobs too. Of course they do. Everybody who has a presence in BC is creating some kind of jobs. But one of the biggest impacts we found in our B2B study was payroll. And this is just a visual representation of the, you know, the non-local business, so the Staples, Office Max type contributions to local jobs. So of course they have some delivery staff, they've got warehouse staff, they have a few salespeople, maintenance, cleaning, repair, all that kind of stuff. But when you compare it to a local business like Mills, you know, at the time they were using a delivery co-op, they've got their delivery staff, they've got accountants, purchasing, IT professionals, like it's just a much bigger impact. And, you know, again, those jobs, a lot of them are the high level jobs. They're not sort of like every business has some kind of lower level retail jobs, but these are higher level, well-paid jobs, you know, all the management jobs and sales, marketing, etc., that are based around a local business's headquarters. I'm having to click so many times to get my slides to go forward, sorry. In 2023, we worked with CFIB on the first pan-Canadian study. So for those of you who are calling in from other places, there is one study where you might be able to find your own recirculation impact number for your province. So this is again available on our website, on our resources page, but this again demonstrates those 4 Ps. So, you know, what percentage of a dollar is going to, in this case, a local retailer? You know, some is profits to the local owners, The labor is the payroll piece, the services and goods is the purchasing piece, and then the charitable donations is the philanthropy piece. And we found that in this case, the local business keeps 66% of every dollar in the local community compared to a multinational at only 11. So that's 6 times. And then if you look at an online giant, it's only 8% stays in the local community compared to the local business. And so it's 8 times. So when you think about a local contract, some of you might be, buying from a local business versus Amazon, say, it's 8 times more to buy from the local business. So there's also other benefits, social and environmental benefits. Social benefits are food and supply chain security, community resilience, contributes to community character, builds the social fabric, supports local labor standards, and again, supports up to 25 times per dollar of revenue to local charities. And then in terms of the environmental benefits, we find that local businesses tend to be located in more, concentrated areas. So they're more walkable communities. They support local environmental standards. They can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, those local products from local businesses up to 66%. That's product dependent, of course. And then lastly, our study on environmental impacts of local found that it can reduce the impact of transportation in the supply chain and reduce waste. Things I like about local purchasing are that it has an immediate impact. So I think we're seeing with a lot of the shift in purchasing, particularly consumer purchasing, that it has an immediate impact. Those local businesses can scale up and, they're creating more jobs, buying more inventory, producing more products immediately. So as much as I love working on climate change and it's super important, it feels like a little longer game. And this I love because you can have an impact with your spending tomorrow. It's that local recirculation is the economic impact. It's based on, relationships. And so, that's a benefit to you too, I think, that in terms of supply chain security, that you have relationships with organizations and they provide better quality often, better service because they're local too. And then we always say brand enhancement, and I thought it's not just brand enhancement right now, but it's also risk management. I think, many of you who work in procurement, your councils are asking you to figure out how to do this. And so I think it's risk management as well, and in knowing that you're doing it properly. We're going to address some of the challenges with local purchasing today. Defining local is one of them, and I'm seeing things all over the map out there. So I'm going to give you some examples and some do's and don'ts. And measuring local impact is hard, so we have some advice on how to do that. And then I think prioritizing your values. You've got other values around. They might be around local, green, social. You might also have considerations like price and does the supplier have the capacity to produce this thing for me? And then there's of course real or perceived cost issues. So those are some of the challenges. We're going to address some of those today. Over to you, Em.
Hi. So thanks so much. Before we get into the solutions and those challenges, really want to talk about social procurement. We often use social procurement to encompass purchasing that supports social enterprises, local businesses, Indigenous-owned businesses, and businesses owned by equity-deserving people. So these are people who have historically been denied equal access to employment, education, and other opportunities. Why are we doing this? Ultimately, we're trying to understand best practices so that you can bring social value into your communities and organizations and face the complex challenges that we're all facing through our purchasing practices. So this is kind of how we're a really great tool to deal with supply chain and trade uncertainties that we're seeing, climate event disruptions that just continue to get worse and worse. So this is kind of social procurement is a really amazing tool to be able to do this. Next slide, please. This is the traditional model for procurement. The purchaser is receiving value for the good or service which the supplier provides, and that all sums up to the economic value for both parties. Procurement people know this very intimately. So while economic value is, of course, important to the purchaser and supplier, we're seeing that we can actually get more out of this equation. So let's go to the next slide. Really want to introduce this concept of community capital. So the health of a community is not measured by economic value alone. We all know this. Building community capital is the means for creating healthy communities. And that requires multiple types of capital. So that's your human capital, social capital, cultural capital, environmental, and economic, of course. So social procurement is really trying to change the perspective on procurement and incorporating community capital into this equation. So next slide. This is the social procurement model for the procurement process, where the buyer and the seller are still receiving their value. It's the same exchange and purchase, but the equation is enhanced by the addition of social value. So the idea is to just enhance the existing procurement practice. It's not about spending additionally, going beyond budgets or your means. We're really just leveraging existing spend to make your spend go farther and bring in that social value, that community capital through our exchanges. Next slide, please. So really huge emphasis on existing procurement. So we're not spending more to be able to do this. The truth is that every single purchase that we make has an economic, environmental, and social impact, whether you intend it or not. Social procurement is about capturing all of those impacts and seeking to make intentional, positive contributions to both the local economy and the overall vibrancy of your community. That's what we all want. As individual consumers, we're already doing this. We're already looking for certified local, organic, ethical purchases. We're all doing this at an individual level, most of us, based on our values. So this is about scaling up that process to the community public purchasing level. Next slide. Let's go to the next slide. So we're just talking about how social procurement is evolving nationally. At Bisocial Canada, we work across the country, and we're finding that social procurement is really being implemented in wide areas. So we're seeing it at the federal government level, policy and pilots for goods and services. We're seeing it at the municipality level, at BCSPI, the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative. That's a hat that we have for delivery as well. We're seeing that happen all over the province and all over the country as well. Institutions, for sure, we have BC Housing, Tourism Vancouver, institutions like that really doing a great job implementing social procurement. And same with big corporations, Chandos Construction, and social procurement is being implemented in ways that make sense for their communities. So lots of ways to do that. One question you're probably all asking is social and local procurement legal under trade agreements? The fact is that yes, it is legal. It's a myth that trade agreements don't allow for social procurement or local procurement. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Trade agreement parameters do apply, and we do have to make adjustments and make sure that we're working within the trade agreements. but they do allow social value considerations in procurement. Next slide, please. Yes. So for regional, local, district, and other forms of municipal governments, municipal organizations, school boards, publicly funded academic, health and social service entities, we all need to respect the trade agreement thresholds, of course. But we have a really great resource. We have our trade agreement primer at Bisocial Canada that helps you navigate these trade agreements. We also have a really great briefing note that kind of is complementary to that resource on our website. I think Emma is doing a really great job adding those to the chat. If you want any more context on how to bring those social value and local procurement pieces into your contracts, and making sure that it's 100% legal, and also working really well for your community. Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Sam. We're going to dive into some of the challenges. We promised that we would help you think about how to overcome some of the challenges to local and social purchasing. And one of the biggest is defining local. And I want to emphasize that there are lots of ways to define local, and you're going to do it the way that makes the most sense to you. But if there ever was a time to link it to the economic impact, that time is now, and I'm sure is part of the basis of your interest in this topic at the time, is that we are trying to shift purchasing towards local businesses to counter some of the economic impact that's happening from the tariffs and the counter tariffs. And so I want to encourage you that now more than ever, as everyone's saying, that we need to use our purchasing and for bolstering our own economy. And so your definition of local, if possible, should be based in how to get that economic impact out of your purchasing. One thing that's useful is to think about a hierarchy. A lot of towns, municipalities, cities, whatever, might want to think about, concentric circles of local, and so different degrees. One is best, next is better. The third is good, that kind of thing. And we have some examples for you of that. And then, LOCO, this is part of our campaign, these local owned, local grown, local made. But that is, we get you to think about, it's sometimes the product. So if it is, then you're thinking about, is it local grown? Is it local made? Is there some other kind of like local value that can be created? If it's not made here, maybe it's designed here. Those kinds of things, those value add that keep some of the economic impact in Canada. And then I want you to think about the business you buy it from. So ideally that's local owned. If it's a local grown or local made product from a local owned business, we call that a hat trick. That's like the best you're going to get in terms of economic impact. But sometimes it might be some blend of those three things. And so we'll get you to think about how to do that. So I have some do's and don'ts. So one option is to use small business as a proxy. I mentioned, local businesses are not always small businesses, but 98% of businesses in Canada are small. And so it's a pretty good proxy. And there are a couple of definitions for small business in Canada. So that helps in terms of that they are, government recognized. And so Industry Canada has less than 100 employees is their definition of small business. And BC Stats has less than 50 because many organizations in BC are very small. And here's an example. So District of Squamish defines in their policy a local small enterprise is a business of any legal structure, operates within the district with a business license that has between 1 and 99 employees. So they're using that Industry Canada definition. So again, you might want to think about the medium size local businesses or larger size local businesses and how to include them. But small business is a pretty good proxy. The second idea is to use a hierarchy. So it might be, your town or city, your region, your province, maybe like Western Canada if you're in this region, and then the rest of Canada. And so I pulled an example from the city of Pitt Meadows. So Pitt Meadows, they've got, when all things are equal, then they're looking for that local as, a way to break that tie. And so firstly, they look at locally. I don't know that they define exactly what that means, but then within the province, within Canada and outside Canada. So it's based on that. What I would suggest to them is to have a really good definition of what the business, ownership, how they're going to define that within that structure. But using a hierarchy is a good example. And then another thing is to look at both the products and the ownership of the business. So the best in terms of economic impact is going to be a business with a local headquarters. And so however you define that is in your town or, city, province, the rest of Canada, etc. And then private ownership. And private ownership is because of that 1P with the profits stay local. And so you're going to have the biggest impact if it's private ownership, because then the profits are recirculating. They're not sort of like going out to all the shareholders. But you might consider Canadian public companies. And, if that's, something you want to do as an organization, or those are mostly your options, then, certainly a Canadian public company has more benefit than a multinational based elsewhere. This is not a label that exists, but this is kind of my fantasy label would be that, one side of the Canadian flag has got, made in Canada. So that's like the product is 80%. And then on the right is, kind of the impact of the ownership. So just an idea, visual to get you to think about that you're considering both things at the same time. Another thing is to use the well-known and accepted definitions. So this is easiest when you're looking at local grown products or local manufactured products. The Government of Canada has some agreed on definitions for those things. So, food or manufactured products, you should be able to find out if they are a product of Canada or made in Canada. And then there's some other certifications that relate to, Buy BC and Island Good are for food products only. And then, of course, Buy Social Canada is certifying social enterprises. So that's something you might use to certify a local business. And then last couple points really are to consider other value add that you can get through the contract. So, it might be that uniforms are never going to be made here, but you might be able to get it from a business that's owned in Canada, and maybe they're doing the design here. And maybe there's some other aspect of the value chain where they're keeping that economic.
77826.
And a coffee contract, coffee's not grown here. And so, that could be from a local owned business. You could ensure that the coffee is roasted here rather than roasted somewhere else and then imported. An idea that Vicki Wakefield gave me from her work in the Okanagan with UBC is that, pop contracts, they're often with the big multinationals, Coke. And so, UBC required that contract, instead of having Minute Maid orange juice, which is made in the US, have Sunripe juices, because they're made right in the Okanagan, and Sunripe is based in the Okanagan. And so, trying to get that local value and negotiate with the multinational to give you that local value within that contract. You could also require local bottling. Some of those products that are not local per se, like Coke and other things, do have bottling plants here, and so there's some benefit to the local economy. You can make local service requirements that often, some of those big companies don't have enough staff to provide you with the service that you need locally. So sometimes that if you're going to get better service, and you're often going to get a local business. And then no matter what kind of business you're working with, you can make local and social hiring and purchasing requirements through that contract, get them to hire local people, hire, people with barriers to employment. you can make local and social purchasing requirements of them and sort of push it onto them to get that value through the contract. And then my don'ts really are around, you know, a few things that I've seen out there. So don't base your definition of local on a postal code, because many multinationals are going to have some kind of presence in Canada, even if it's a salesperson with a local address or a warehouse or something like that. Then you're going to, you're not going to get the no US that you're looking for right now if you base it on postal codes, because many multinationals that are based in or US companies are going to have a local address. So that basing it on a Canadian address or a postal code is a no-no if you're looking for that local impact. And then again, basing it on a local business license. If you recall the Squamish example, they did both. They said Squamish business license, but they also gave the definition of a small business. So many organizations, again, with a local address are going to have a business license in your community, but that does not mean that they're not a US company or a multinational. Another challenge, you know, people are going to say is, how do I find local and social suppliers? So there's many directories out there, and I'm sure you all are using different directories to find local businesses. But, you know, we have a couple of directories. One is on the LOCO BC site. Another is a new and growing supplier resource on the BC Buy Local site, where we're profiling BC suppliers. We're also crowdsourcing a supplier directory that has kind of a regional tab, so you can, you know, go Sea to Sky or Lower Mainland and look at the suppliers in your area. We have profiles on businesses on the BC Buy Local site, and then local business improvement areas and chambers of commerce are great places to find local suppliers. They've got, every one of them has a directory. Social Enterprises by Social Canada, of course, has a directory. And in terms of sustainable businesses, the Canadian B Corp directory is a useful resource as well. And then there's a couple of different things under looking for Black, Indigenous, and people of color owned businesses. The Indigenous Business Council, Shop First Nations, there's several Black business directories. And then there's a couple of different ones around that are behind paywalls. So if you're part of supplier diversity programs and you're paying for these things, then you can get access to those directories too. So there's lots of different ways to go and find local suppliers. Some of it may be looking at your contract and thinking about, how do I advertise to these businesses in ways that I might not have in the past. Over to you, Em.
Okay. So some
Can we just answer Katya's question? Katya,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there was just a question in the chat. I think it's just relevant to what you just were talking about. Are there any best practices or models for supporting local suppliers to be ready and able to respond to these government procurement opportunities? So like one might be getting them to, you know, advertising in these kinds of directories or towards these directories, but are there any others?
Probably you'd be better. I know that Buy Social Canada has done some work around that. Our other webinar that we did in 2021 was around when BC SPI was rolling out across the province, moving from like a coastal communities initiative to a BC-wide initiative. We did a webinar as well that included both purchasers and businesses, and was really around how do you do business with local governments. But do you have some capacity building projects with the businesses themselves, or?
Yeah, and we have a really great vendor resource guide that we can share as well for this. We have definitely seen some really great examples of local governments engaging with local businesses. One of the we can get into some examples as well. One of them is unbundling contracts to make them a little bit more accessible. So what that means is, I'll get into it in the next few slides, but
Maybe dive back in and we'll
yeah.
as we go.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. We can come back to it at the end, I'm sure. Okay. So strategies for in the procurement process for putting social value and local procurement into the procurement practice. Direct awards is one. This is usually under trade agreement threshold amounts, which is usually under 5,000, 25,000, depending on if it's goods and services or construction. Another really great thing to note is that in the trade agreements, they allow exempt organizations and suppliers. So that includes nonprofits. A really great thing to keep in mind there is that most social enterprises are nonprofits as well. So keeping direct awards in mind for your procurement needs is a really great strategy. Next slide, please. We have a really great example of, I was alluding to this earlier, was the unbundling strategy. If you have a really large project and there's distinct pieces of that contract that could be unbundled, that could help local businesses and social enterprises, businesses that are priorities in your community to come into the contract because they'd be smaller pieces. And so that's kind of about the capacity building, I believe. In Tofino, in the district of Tofino, it's a really small community, pretty isolated. They were doing a street revitalization project. And then keeping in mind that Tofino only has about 2,000 people living there. And so there's some really great local businesses, but would not be able to be part of this contract as a larger contract. So Tofino unbundled the landscaping portion of this project. And so they were able to contract with a local supplier to do this. And what they saw, this was an $1.8 million contract. And this unbundling would have, the general contractor would have subcontracted out this piece anyway. And so that was a really great opportunity that they were able to give to a local supplier. They saw cost savings, so they didn't have to pay for staff travel or accommodations or equipment transportation. You have to be mindful that it was not an example of contract splitting, which is a totally different thing. It was a distinct landscaping portion of the larger contract. And like I said, the general contractor would have been subcontracted out anyway. And we have a really great, more detailed case study on the BCSBI website on this Tofino unbundling example. Another great strategy is small buys. So this is anything under a certain threshold. I think it changes depending on the community that you're in. Usually it's under 1,500 or your credit card limit. And these are really great opportunities to leverage the small buys that staff already make, such as food and catering, venues, gifts, travel, office supplies, those sorts of buys. They're a really low-hanging fruit for really bringing in your social value and local procurement. And we have a really awesome example of that as well at the city of Victoria. They realized, if you go to the next slide, they realized that about 3.9 million over the whole organization at the city was all small buys. So they realized that they were able to train their staff, get some internal buy-in on their social values, their community values, and was able to yeah, leverage that spend to be able to get that social value into their communities through small buys specifically. Yeah, okay. Is this your slide, Amy, or is this mine? Sorry. Oh, this is my slide. Sorry. How can another way to put in social procurement is by putting it into your policy. Squamish has a really awesome example, and they have a really clear language within their policy. The strength of their language is what the policy direction is. It uses terms like commitment and achieving social value objectives, defining that. And then it's a pretty descriptive manner as opposed to prescriptive. So what that means, it's applied to be flexible, and it opens up for a wider range of opportunities for social value inclusion. So if you consider a social procurement policy, remember that your objective is to align your social purpose with your existing purchasing. Yeah, we can bring in some resources for that in later slides as well.
Nice, thank you. So one of the last things we want to encourage you, and I mentioned it before, is to try to, if you must contract with a multinational, and, I'm sure sometimes you must, that there are several ways to get value out of that contract, economic value, social value. And so just wanted to throw out some examples. So a couple of them are kind of old, but one of them I just mentioned. So UBC had an industrial supply contract with Acklands Granger, and they had, so that's like a big company, and they used the greenhouse gas benefit, trying to reduce greenhouse gases in their supply chain, as a reason for sourcing local, and managed to get the company to bring in, rather than bringing garbage bags from China, they brought in garbage bags that were made in Drumheller. So, and I've given you an example, since that was in their policy also, that they were trying to reduce greenhouse gases. So I've given you another example here. City of Pet Meadows is talking about, right in their policy, sustainable and ethical purchasing practices. They're talking about, in our supply chain, we're trying to reduce these things. And so if it's in your policy, it's even better. But there is a way to embed that, and often the local product is going to have a reduced waste, reduced environmental benefit, or environmental impact. Another way that the city of Vancouver did it was with a contract with the Evelyn Saller Center. They had Sodexo, was a big multinational food service company that got the contract, but they required them to do local and social hiring. Evelyn Saller is right in the downtown east side, and so it made so much sense that they did social hiring, and right from the local population, people who need employment. And encourage local food product sourcing as part of that contract as well. And then, as I mentioned, UBC Okanagan, as part of a contract with Coke, managed to get locally produced juice. Often that juice is then produced with using local fruit from the Okanagan as a substitute for Minute Maid juice made elsewhere in a contract with Coca-Cola. So if you must contract with a multinational, then there are ways to get local value out of that contract.
So we offer quite a few tools and resources to be able to help with social procurement, local procurement. At Buy Social Canada, this is a graphic on what the social procurement journey looks like. It is not linear. There's lots of different nodes. There's lots of iterating. And so what we're doing at Buy Social Canada is we're working with social value suppliers, and also all levels of government, institutions, businesses, communities, to help with this journey. So we offer a full suite of services that bring our partners through the social procurement journey, no matter where you want to begin or no matter where you are. These include learning materials, resources, tools. We have online training and workshops. We have consulting services and project-based support, supply chain audit and analysis. And we have, like Amy said earlier, social enterprise certification, and we have our directory to help purchasers make those connections. These are resources that are free and found on our website. Really great guides that we continuously publish every year. And they're really comprehensive and helps as much as you need. Like I said, we have consulting services. We also have our social procurement professional certificate. I think twice a year, we have a cohort that goes through this certificate program. And then, yeah, social enterprise certification that is across Canada. At BCSPI, we also have services for members. We have training specifically for local governments and public purchasers. We also have a community of practice for members to come together and casually problem solve, talk about what's working, what isn't. There's lots more other resources on this slide, but these are the resources that members really love, including best practice examples, and the case studies are free on the website for anybody to browse. And so one call to action to become a BCSPI member: mobilize your existing spend, build your capacity and your learning opportunities with your staff, and deliver on your strategic goals. Align your procurement practices with your strategic goals, with your community values. Yeah, it's a really great community. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I just want to leave a few minutes for questions at the end. Local BC has some resources. We have, I'll do a blog post today with all of the links, so you have it all in one place, but we've of course got our economic and environmental impact research. I think Katya's been sharing that in the chat links. We have the 4Ps framework. I have a slide and an explanation of that for you all. And then we did have a webinar in 2021, I mentioned, around doing business with governments, implementing social procurement. So we've got it from the business side, and then several other case studies of other. District of Squamish was in there, but Cowichan Valley Regional District and others are also highlighted, explaining their process if you're in a similar situation at a municipality. And then we're thinking about doing some small group workshops to help around definitions of local. So if you're interested in that, let me know. We're not going to put them together if no one's interested, but thinking that probably people need to workshop a little bit this definition of local. And then of course we can provide direct support. And in terms of next steps, this is a really great time to change your policy. If you don't have local and social procurement in your policy, chances are that you will have support of your council, and it will be evergreen as well. These examples that we're giving you are not from, they predate this whole tariff war. They are legal, as we've mentioned, and so it's a good time to do it because you'll have the support, and you know, then that impact will will be longstanding potentially after this is over, if it's ever over. We want that stability for local businesses and social enterprises as well, that they're not going to staff up and become larger to meet the needs currently, and then we'll all just go back to buying from multinationals afterwards. Hopefully we can provide that stability to them over time. Obviously my main message is to define local according to the highest economic impact that you can get out of your purchasing, and working to identify Canadian suppliers for upcoming contracts. And again, that might be, thinking about how to advertise, how to find those suppliers, and how to advertise to them might be a challenge that both our organizations can help you with. Here's our contact information, and we'd love to have a few minutes. We're just 6 minutes before noon. So if you have any questions, maybe just put up your hand and Katya can help us. work through. Anyone have questions, a comment, anything? Katja, you're muted. I can see you
Just
talking.
seeing a thank you in the, and okay, first question, which organizations are tracking the economic impact of more Canadian buying and where can we find this information?
Which organizations are tracking it?
Yeah.
Good question. One example I use, it's not always directly related to procurement, but the community benefits agreement policy at the City of Vancouver has a pretty robust tracking in terms of the local procurement. They're actually not doing it themselves. So it's not a municipal, it's they're forcing developers to do it if they're building above, I think, 15,000 square feet, 150,000 square feet. I can't remember exactly what the figure is, but there's a threshold. And if you're building buildings of a certain size, you're required to do it. So I can add that. I'll make a note that I have a couple of slides from another presentation on that they're tracking that pretty well. I don't know if you have any examples.
I think the Canadian Urban Institute is also, I think they just released a tool for actions that municipalities are taking across Canada. So that's specific to municipalities. It's got procurement and supply chain policies, economic and business support, and categories such as that. So I think they have a pretty live tracker on what's happening.
Yeah, I've seen that. One thing I do challenge about that is that I've seen, like, as councils have said, go figure out how to do local purchasing, that often staff have come back and said, we are doing X percentage of local purchasing. And I'm mostly seeing those stories in the news. And so trying to follow up to see how local is defined. And that's where I'm, encouraging all you to define it well so that that's a risk to say, like, oh, so many of our suppliers are local. And then when we dig a little bit further, we find out that you've used postal code or business license or some of these not so great metrics. So that tracker I saw does have, a list of municipalities who are, passed a motion or are reporting back. But to my knowledge, they're not really sharing what their definition of local was. So if you all have examples, I would love to hear them too. And I'm trying to track them, but it's been a very busy time, and it's sort of the devil's in the details there. It's sort of the staff, and then when they go back and how they define it, when they look at all the contracts, and that's not always, it's not always transparent how that's done.
So Amy's asking if no one's tracking our local or Canadian purchasing, how do we know if if the Buy Canada movement is actually helping the economy versus buying from multinationals? I mean, I'll just say that part of the reason why LOCO started doing our local impact assessments is because we weren't seeing a lot of that kind of economic reporting consistently across Canada. So some of the earliest reports, and we're trying to do them consistently. Yeah, so there's kind of like the bigger economic views of things, and then the local views, and not a lot in between. So I don't really know if that's an answer. There's a lot of people I have seen in the media. Obviously, it's getting more. I think we'll see more because of the situation that we're in right now. But it's kind of like a cobbling together a bunch of different things. Anyone else for questions?
Okay. We made up the time. I was worried after our technological glitch there that we were going to be late. I want to thank you so much for coming and for all you're trying to do in your organizations. And we know it's a very busy time, and things are changing daily. And so, use all the resources, lean on us, contact us. We're all in this together. And you will receive a follow-up email with a copy of the recording, all of our resources, and a PDF version of the slides. And I just wanted to thank By Social Canada. They are one of our partners. We're community champion partners. And thanks for putting this together with us and all your great learnings and resources. And I was trying to get to this slide when we've passed off our introductions, but we couldn't do the work that we do without our partners. So we have some really great founding members, Van City and Renewal Partners, and By Social Canada as a community champion partner. And then on our Buy Local campaign specifically, we have so many great organizations we're working with: City of New West, Invest New West, Vancam, Freightways, Chinatown Foundation, City of Maple Ridge, Downtown Surrey BIA, Chris Media, so many other organizations, BIAs, and businesses. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.